Let's advance to item number 3, page 13. This proposed City Planning Commission certification to permit a plaza bonus on property to be developed with predominantly residential use in sub-area A of the Special Sheepshead Bay District. I'd also like to introduce Daphne Lundy, who's also making her very first presentation before the commission. She's also from the Brooklyn office. On item number 3, page 13.
Bet you never expected to see Emmons Avenue before us so quickly again.
Anna.
I am George.
Good morning. Oh, I'm sorry. Good afternoon. It's been a while. Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commission. This is a private application for commission certification for floor area bonus pursuant to the Special Sheepshead Bay District, Section 9413. By providing a plaza, this would generate a floor area bonus of 31,629 square feet and facilitate a mixed-use residential and commercial development. The project is Area A of the Special Sheepshead Bay District, shown here, within an R5 C22 zoning district. It is bounded by the Belt Parkway Service Road to the north, East 19th Street, Emmons Avenue to the south, and Sheepshead Bay Road to the west. Area A is one full block and zoning lot. The total area is 42,172 square feet. The Special Sheepshead Bay District is comprised of 20 blocks and 80 sub-districts, areas A through H, with regulations governing development and permitted uses for each area. The Special Sheepshead Bay District was established in 1973 to promote and strengthen the waterfront character of the area. It also sought to encourage the development of housing with amenities, to improve vehicular and pedestrian circulation, and to encourage the creation of public open space as part of new developments. At the time of the creation of the Special Sheepshead Bay District, there are over 10 vacant acres of land along Emmons Avenue. Area A was mapped as a site that was deemed suitable for higher density development because of its proximity to the subway and commercial uses along Sheepshead Bay Road, which the train station is slightly north of here. Residential and community facility uses are permitted as of right. Water-dependent uses such as boat clubs are also permitted, along with restaurants of unlimited size and frontage. Other uses are outlined in Use Group SB, Sheepshead Bay, and are limited to a maximum of 3,500 square feet with a frontage of 35 feet. The current basic residential floor area for Area A is 1.25. In Area A, all developments with frontages along Emmons Avenue are required to provide and maintain a plaza for public use that abuts the Emmons Avenue street line and is at least 4,000 square feet. At least 15% of the plaza area must be landscaped and planted with trees. The plaza must also contain lighting, pedestrian walks, and sitting areas. Permitted obstructions include kiosks, open cafes, and sculptures not to exceed 30% of the total plaza area. Developments in Area A are also eligible for a floor area bonus by providing additional plaza area or an arcade, not to exceed an FAR of 2. The additional floor area may be used for residential use on the same zoning lot or may be transferred to a receiving lot within the special district. The aggregate bonus floor area permitted should not be more than 60% of the basic FAR of 2. The surrounding area consists of commercial, residential, and transportation uses zoned R4, R5, and R6 with C1 and C22 overlays. The project site was formerly occupied by a commercial use, the El Greco Diner. To the north of the project area is a cluster of 1 to 2 story commercial uses along Sheepshead Bay, shown here, as well as several 6-story apartment buildings with a cluster of 1 to 2 family homes along East 19th Street, Voorhees Avenue, and Ocean Avenue. Go along this area. Along the western edge, there are 3 6-story apartment buildings, mixed-use buildings with retail on the ground floor, and that's outside of the special district. So this area here. The site is also adjacent to the Emmons Avenue Promenade that connects to several parks in the area, as well as the Sheepshead Bay Footbridge that connects to Manhattan Beach and Shore Boulevard Promenade, shown in the picture in the bottom left. The proposed development will consist of a 7-story mixed-use building with ground floor and first floor commercial uses. Potential uses would be those allowed in the Special Sheepshead Bay District, such as restaurants. The portion of the proposed development with frontages along Emmons Avenue and Sheepshead Bay Road will rise to 2 stories. The remaining portion of the building will be set back. A 35-foot deep setback will be provided along Emmons Avenue, shown here, and a 10-foot deep setback would be provided along all of the frontages. This reflects the special height and setback regulations of Area A of the Special Sheepshead Bay District. At the time of the creation of the special district, plaza guidelines were limited. The proposed plaza will create a privately owned public plaza that matches current standards for POPs, and will include amenities beyond the requirements of the Special Sheepshead Bay District. The plaza will extend along Sheepshead Bay Road and Emmons Avenue frontages, where the entrances would be located for commercial retail spaces. The plaza will be open and accessible at all times and contain 9,037 square feet. POP's public signage will be displayed at each corner of the plaza along Emmons Avenue, East 19th Street, and Sheepshead Bay Road. So along each of these corners. 13 trees will be planted in the plaza, 5 at grade and 8 in planters that would include planter-ledge seating. The total planting and landscaping of the plaza will be 20%, which is above the minimum of 15% in the Special Sheepshead Bay District. Because this area is in the flood zone, planting species chosen for the plaza will be salt tolerant to mitigate the loss of trees and shrubs following a flooding event. As per POP's regulation, there will be 3 types of seating provided: 4 movable tables with chairs, 210.19 linear feet of fixed bench and planter-ledge seating, as well as 29.07 linear feet of sculptural seating. There will also be a private cafe seating provided that will be associated with the ground floor commercial uses. And this is shown in blue. The plaza will also include 11 lampposts. There will also be 6 trash can receptacles within 50 feet of all seating areas. The permitted obstructions total 2,707 square feet and do not exceed the 30% of the total floor area as per Special Sheepshead Bay District Plaza regulations. The plaza will also include an 8-foot wide circulation path throughout. 2 bicycle racks will be provided on the sidewalks along Emmons Avenue and Sheepshead Bay Road as per DOT standards. So the circulation path is the hatching, and there should be a bike rack here and then along the side. By providing a plaza as per 9408 special floor area provisions, the plaza will generate a floor area bonus of 0.75 FAR, 31,629 square feet. With the additional bonus, the proposed development will contain 81,220 square feet, 26 square feet of residential floor area, within 58 residential dwelling units located on floors 2 to 7, and 3,118 square feet of commercial floor area on the first floor, for a total FAR of 2. The ground floor contains a total of 21,055 square feet of commercial floor area. It is a cellar and does not count towards zoning floor area. The project will also include 134 parking spaces. I would also like to note that the area is in the 100-year flood zone. New buildings in the flood zone are required to comply with flood-resistant standards in the NYC Building Code. And as such, the residential lobby portion of this building will be wet flood-proofed, and the ground floor commercial will actually have deployable flood shields that will be installed prior to its flood. And this rendering actually shows some of the floodgates and stuff. And that's everything.
Thank you, Daphne. Questions?
Yeah, question, please.
So, Mr. Cantor.
Do they have any plans for the roof? The roof of the commercial?
So because this isn't a flood zone, normally people would provide parking beneath, but what they're doing is providing parking partially on the first floor and then some parking on the second story roof.
Parking on the second perimeter. How are they going to buffer the parking from the windows of the housing?
It doesn't seem like there is. I can check in with them, but I don't believe that there is some sort of obstruction to block that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
For the parking on the first floor, I know that they are glazing the windows, so you wouldn't be able to see it from the street.
Ms. Levin and Ms. Efron.
Yet again, we're reminded how unusual the Sheepshead Bay Special District is. Actually, there's 3 things I want to check. This is a certification, but we're still referring it out to the community board, right? So
Correct.
We're going to get another swing at this after we hear what the community board has to say?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Which is reassuring. If I understand this correctly, the open space is mandatory. They have to provide that open space, but then they get a bonus for it too?
So they have to provide a minimum open space of 4,000 square feet, and if
Yeah.
they provide additional open space, they can generate a floor area bonus. So instead of providing the 4,000, they've gone up to around 9,000.
But it looks like from the, maybe I did the math wrong, it looks like they're getting the bonus for all of the floor area, not just the increment.
That's correct.
Okay,
And
so they're doing what they have to do, and they're getting a bonus for it.
well, I think, as you probably are familiar with the other projects in the special district, the text is sort of complicated to interpret in that sense.
Yeah.
But the way, we met with zoning, and we've had this conversation beforehand, and it seems the way that it was interpreted and the fact that they are kind of using the base and adding onto it was a correct interpretation of the text.
Okay. And then the second
So they're
thing,
doing a mandatory plus mandatory, and then they get the full.
but they get the bonus on the mandatory plus.
On the
plus.
mandatory plus, not just the plus.
Yeah, so, that's unique. But, you know, why does that, it's perfectly consistent with the special sheet.
There are so many special things about this area. So
But the other thing
That's why they call it
that's
special.
interesting to see, and this one is not unique to Special Sheepshead Bay, is you got 21,000 square feet of commercial space that's on the ground floor, but it's called a cellar, so it's not floor area. You know, I think we all approved those rules,
we did.
but I've not.
Well, I
they-
didn't,
they-
but
they
you
look-
did.
They look a little bit different when you're looking at a commercial strip like that and being told that
Right.
it's not floor area. Yeah.
So,
They were good, actually, go ahead, Deb.
I'm not saying it to challenge it, but to just say, whoa, it looks a little bit different from, you know, once you go through the process and you say, oh, that all makes intuitive sense, and then a picture like this comes back and you go, oh.
so this is really an issue we see in areas where the flood elevation above grade is about 6 feet or 5 feet, because at that point, you might be half of the floor. So depending on how high the developer chooses to do the floor-to-ceiling heights on the ground floor, you know, a difference between 10 feet floor-to-ceiling versus 13 feet floor-to-ceiling might be the difference between a basement and a cellar. And in this case, I believe the floor-to-ceiling height on the ground floor where there would be retail is 10 feet, and because of that, it kind of falls into the cellar category.
Okay. Well, certainly more retail at this location is good for the neighborhood, so I'll be very interested to see what the community board has to say.
The community board actually saw an earlier version of this in April, the draft, but we'll be sending out the full actual application following this. And they supported it.
Oh, interesting, okay. Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
A comment and a question. The comment is, it seems massively, slightly out of scale. I know we're here to talk about the plaza, but the two floors that are behind the plaza that we are here to talk about look awfully muscular compared to what else is in that neighborhood. That's just a comment. And then an observation and a question, which is that quite a few of the restaurants seem to be 24 hours. I don't know what the current POPs regulations are about 24-hour access. There is no fencing in the picture. Is that something we could just confirm that, in fact, there would be 24-hour access and visual access 24 hours, so that the stroll up and down that really beautiful promenade would be one that people would be able to enjoy?
So the plaza itself would be accessible at all times. I think it depends on what commercial the developer is able to attract, but the idea is that perhaps along this area there might be some sort of separation, but along the entire plaza itself that would be open.
Be codified through restrictive declarations.
Yes, including fencing versus no fencing.
So they could not put fencing around the plaza itself.
No. It would be perhaps with the open-air cafe that they're providing for the retail.
Mr. Cantor, then Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you. Do we know how they propose to handle the water situation in the cellar of the retail?
To clarify, while it is a cellar, the actual space isn't below grade. The situation
Cellar
here.
is 50% or less below grade.
So because this area is in the flood zone, we're not measuring from the ground, we're measuring from the flood-resistant construction elevation. That becomes the new measurement from height. And in this case, the FRCE is around 6 feet above grade. So in this situation, a space that's at grade and is the ground floor can technically be a cellar because half of it is below the FRCE, not below grade.
Will the slab at grade be subject to flooding?
Correct.
What will they be doing?
So for the ground floor in the area that's below the FRCE, what they're proposing is installing deployable flood shields. So when we know that a storm would occur, they would install these gates that kind of just slide in. And then for the residential lobby that's also at grade, that area would be wet flood proof, so the water could kind of just go in and come out.
And the elevatoring?
For the residential.
For the residential, if that was,
The floor is going to be flooded and it can go in and come out. I assume you mean it can go into the lobby and come out from the lobby?
correct.
What about the elevatoring? How are they keeping the community, how do they keep allowing the unit owners to exit or enter during the flood?
We can find out.
How many floors is it altogether, Daphne?
It's-
The residential?
7 stories.
So conceivably, the elevator could be out during flooding and they'd have to walk. But we'll find out about the elevator. Mrs. Wack?
Just a question. Do you know the allocation of parking between the commercial and the residential?
Yes, so for the R5C22 overlay, they'd need to require 130 parking spaces, 50 for the residential and 80 for the commercial, and in total, they're providing 134, so 4 extra parking
50 for
spaces.
the residential. And you know how many are going to be on the roof of on the second floor area? Not on top of the roof?
Right. I can look into the breakdown. I think the vast majority is actually going to be in the portion that's glazed, but there will be some parking on the second roof.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Daphne on this? Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you.
So this is referred out to the community board for 45 days. We'll see you back here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good presentation.
Let's now move to item number 4, page 34, to Brooklyn pre-hearing application with respect to expanding the boundaries of the MetroTech bid. Now, our presenter is Barry Dinnerstein, who's Deputy Director of Housing, Economic, and Infrastructure Planning. We're on item number 4, page 34, Brooklyn pre-hearing, MetroTech bid, amended district plan.
Good afternoon. This is an application from the Department of Small Business Services to extend the existing MetroTech area bid south to cover 10 blocks, 10 new blocks, centered around the Brooklyn Academy of Music in downtown Brooklyn. The large existing bid would provide maintenance and advocacy services for this area that's known as the Downtown Brooklyn Cultural District. The MetroTech bid was originally established in 1991, and its main focus at creation was to service the MetroTech office development, as well as blocks surrounding it. In 2004, the Commission approved a new plan for downtown Brooklyn, and that plan created a series of zoning map and zoning text amendments, new public open space, pedestrian and transit improvements for downtown Brooklyn. One provision of the plan was to create a cultural district centered around the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The plan's components included new performance and rehearsal space, office space for diverse groups of local arts organizations, public plazas, a library, a cinema, and housing. Most of the developments are presently underway, and the extension of the existing MetroTech bid to this new area is requested by property owners, cultural groups, and by the city. The existing MetroTech bid, which is this area to the north shown in blue, has a budget of about $2.6 million. It's one of 8 business improvement districts and special assessment districts to operate in downtown Brooklyn. 3 of the bids, special assessment districts, are operated by the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. Those include the Metro Tech bid, the Fort Livingston bid, and the Fulton Mall Special Assessment District. I will point out that within a few weeks, we will also be seeing an application by the FAB Alliance, which is a Fulton Area Business Alliance, what FAB stands for, which covers Fulton Street, and they are proposing to extend their bid to cover 4 properties at the edge of Metro Tech, proposed Metro Tech bid. One block within the proposed bid is in a historic district. That's the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. That one block is where the Brooklyn Academy of Music is. It's also a block that contains One Hanson Plaza, which is the One Hanson Place, which is the former Williamsburg Savings Bank building. The area for the proposed bid expansion contains approximately 73 retailers, including 41 in the Atlantic Center Mall. Retail rents are as high as $100 to $125 per foot, and there are minimal vacancies. Some of the stores in the Atlantic Center Mall have some of the highest grossing stores for their chains in the country. There are also a number of office spaces in the district with office tenants including the Bank of New York Mellon, HSBC Bank, and others. Rents average between $35 and $40 per foot. There's also a conversion of a mini storage facility that is located at 41 Flatbush Avenue. That building is being converted to office space. It's about 250,000 square feet of what will be new office space in downtown Brooklyn. The district will also have 12 small buildings that have ground floor retail with residential above, kind of your common sort of store with 1 or 2 units above, maybe 2 or 3 floors that's found in the city. And then there are 34 small commercial buildings that are occupied solely by either retail tenants or community facility tenants. So the newly expanded bid would be 2 sub-areas. Each sub-area would have their own budget and assessment formula. The existing bid will become the north sub-area with a budget in the first year of about $2.6 million. The new bid expansion area would be the south sub-area with a budget of about $553,000 in the first year. The south sub-area budget could rise to $1 million after the 5th year, and that's as a result of new development planned or already under construction in the district. At that point, the total budget would be $3.6 million. In the first year, it's anticipated that the budget for the combined areas would be $3.1 million. The bid will also receive revenue that has been given to it by the city to maintain public plazas in the district. It's about $208,000 per year. And there will also be a small voluntary contribution from the various cultural organizations who normally do not have to contribute to the bid, and they're projecting to give a voluntary contribution of about $10,000 per year. The existing bid, which will become the north sub-area, has a complex formula in terms of assessing property, which assesses the Metro Tech office buildings at a different rate than other property in the district. The new South Sub-District will assess all property at a rate of approximately 23 cents per $100 of value. In both sub-areas, a residential property will be fully assessed, paying the same rate as commercial. The South Sub-area contains a mix of building types. There are 4 large mixed rental and commercial complexes, one of which is complete, 3 of which are under construction. And they contain about 1,300 units in total. The average assessment for these kinds of properties will be about $38,000 per year. There are 12 small mixed-use properties which contain 35 residential units, 18 ground floor commercial, and 18 ground floor commercial spaces. Projected average assessment for these properties is about $489 per year. There are 6 large commercial properties, including the Atlantic Center Mall. The average assessment per property is about $54,000 per year. There are 34 small commercial properties with projected average assessment of about $1,388 per year. There are 248 residentially owner-occupied units, generally condo units. It is projected that those owners will pay about $118 per year on average. The South Subdistrict, with a projected budget of about $553,000, is projecting in its first year to spend about $165,000 for sanitation, $58,000 for landscaping, $47,000 for maintenance, $40,000 for programming, and about $241,000 for general administration and for reserve. There are 4 public plazas in the district. 2 of the plazas, Fox Square and Arts Plaza, are complete. 2 other plazas, South Site Plaza, which could use a better name, and Times Plaza, are in design or in construction. The bid will maintain these plazas using bid funds as well as funds that were transferred from the city as a result of a fund that was established dedicated for eventual plaza maintenance, and that money came from former parking lot revenues. Cultural groups in the area will help program the plazas as an in-kind contribution. When the MetroTech bid was established in the early 90s, the area had few residents. The bid assessment was created anticipating all of its funds would be received from commercial property. Since the bid was established, there are approximately 3,400 residential units in the district. The newly proposed South Sub-area has about 600 occupied units today, with 700 more planned under construction. There are additional properties that are also expected to result in new residential units. All residential property in the district pay the full bid assessment. Most bids do not assess residential property or have residents pay a reduced rate. The assessment formula proposed by the bid results in smaller, older properties, usually with ground floor commercial spaces, paying a very modest assessment. Large residential commercial properties will pay a substantial assessment. Most of the new residential properties are in buildings that are rental and are subject to rent stabilization. Rent stabilization does not allow for the passing through of assessment to tenants. There are 248 condo units in the South Sub area. Each residential owner will be required to directly pay a surcharge on their property tax bill for the bid assessment. Commercial property owners have overwhelmingly supported the bid, with 90% of the assessed value signing ballots in favor of the district. Commercial tenants have not responded to requests for support, with only 15% of the businesses responding in favor. No businesses responded negatively. Residential property owners also failed to significantly respond to requests to express an opinion about the bid. Only 10% of the 283 owners responded in favor of the bid. Only 1% responded negatively. And I will say that there was a very strong effort to try and get residential tenants to sign ballots in support. A number of meetings were held with condo associations. Those condo associations were generally very favorable. But when it came down to getting them to sign something saying we support, the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, the sponsor, was not successful. To make sure that the needs of the residents are looked after by the bid has agreed to establish a residency advisory committee. The Downtown Brooklyn Partnership envisions this committee meeting regularly prior to bid board meetings, and the group would be able to bring to the attention of the bid board issues and concerns about the neighborhood and the operation of the bid. Community Board 2 voted 31 in favor, 1 against, and 2 abstained.
Thank you, Barry. Questions? Ms. Efron.
Hi. I realize it's a cultural district, and therefore there are going to be a lot of nonprofits in the area, but some of them have really substantial budgets. If the total expected annual income from all the nonprofits there, and I can rattle off 6 in my head, are $10,000, that strikes me as extremely low, considering the benefit that they receive. I realize it's voluntary.
I find it very exciting that they're voluntarily giving money at all.
Because they're not taxable.
I'm actually equally concerned about precedent moving forward, that nonprofits, despite our love for them, feel some responsibility for participating as community members within a bid situation. That's all.
Well, because they're nonprofit and not taxable,
I understand.
they don't pay, and that's the legislation. And so whatever they pay is what they pay.
Right. I would imagine a negotiated payment in lieu of tax would be really an interesting idea going forward.
That's what it is.
Well, just in response to that, I would say, I mean, my reaction is similar to Mr. Cirillo's. But I do, I mean, as a general proposition, I do agree that since the not-for-profits are among the cheap, in any bid, I'm not referring to this one particularly, I'll use the meatpacking example as a meatpacking district as another example of one of the major reasons for the meatpacking bid was the creation, was development of the Whitney, which is providing a tremendous excitement, but also additional burdens on the meatpacking district, and also a very well-endowed institution. And in other cities, not-for-profits do contribute to the bids, especially in these circumstances. Not required by law, obviously, but I know Mr. Cirillo has got a lot of experience in this area, and I dare say that in other cities, Philadelphia particularly, not-for-profits
Yes.
do make a significant contribution.
And a lot of time is spent by us in helping to market and have an experience for those who are visiting the not-for-profits. I mean, there's a variety of the cultural institutions versus a not-for-profit office space, which has a different impact. We have non-tax, tax exempt government buildings that provide huge services in the neighborhood, consulates and other, and not just city government, which of course Grand Central in the middle of the neighborhood, but where we have literally thousands of people who show up to register for things, to get benefits, to understand what's going on. Those are the areas where we have increased services, and there's no contribution. So this is definitely not enough, but the fact that they're stepping up and given the purpose of this, I think it's the right message to send, whether that is not for citywide issue, and look at this as a whole issue. Obviously, it can be quite controversial at some level, but you raise a very, very good point, which I appreciate.
Clearly not required by the statute. My question is, would the possibility is that pursuant to that statute, or is it just more philanthropic?
So it is an art district, right? There is no restriction along the art, I believe, and there is a payment in lieu of taxes that has been negotiated, and it's fairly substantial contribution to the state.
It's a
Payment in lieu of tax, yeah.
payment in lieu of assessment, or payment in lieu of
Yeah, or assessment.
assessment, but negotiated.
Yeah. And
Go right ahead.
I would agree that that's something that I was going to raise as well. It's clearly a cultural district, and it was intended to be originally. My question is, what, perhaps this is an argument to make to the cultural institutions. I wonder what % of the district is dedicated to cultural uses. They're clearly not incorporated in the assessed value, right? But they make up a major element of, the streetscape and the frontage.
I don't know in terms of Florida how much they make up, but they certainly are the reason why people would want to be here.
Yes, and I think, we should really encourage them to be good neighbors here and contribute much more than this $10,000, given that they will benefit significantly, and this is the purpose of the district.
I had another question with respect to the budget. It seems that I'm a little confused as to the budget numbers here. So the 553 is what's coming from the assessment. Then there's, this 10,000 that's coming from cultural institutions, and then something, an additional 200 that's coming from public plaza funds. Could you explain the public plaza funds?
There was money, these were all parking lots, and there was revenue that came from the parking lots, which I believe was put into escrow. And so the money has been held by EDC, and now will go to the bid for use in terms of maintenance of the plaza. And I think there's about 7 years' worth of funding there. It's a little unclear what happens at the end of year 7, but they have a good amount of money in the first few years to get these plazas up and operating, and then after that, maybe the cultural groups will have to kick in more money.
Okay, so it's not in perpetuity?
No.
Unlike the assessment, okay.
Right.
And then another question with respect to the, what's the set aside for general administration and reserve. I did a quick calculation, I think it's about 45% that's going for general administration. How does that compare to other bids, and is that high or low? I mean, it gets back to sort of the question I continue to have. It's very difficult to understand this in the absence of metrics that allow us to compare apples to apples.
I think for a bid this size, it's somewhat typical. There's a lot of programming here that is going to be done by staff. So on some level, it is administrative, but on some level, it's actually sort of doing things in terms of the programming of the plazas, doing events. So it's not exactly administration in the sense of some of the other bids, which are much more just straight maintenance of the various services that the bids provide.
Yeah, I would love to see, we talked about this, or Staten Island also, some sort of way to be able to compare budgets, apples to apples by, linear frontage or, total square footage in the district, so that we can make better, a more clear determination as to whether the funds are sufficient to do what they need, and then to be able to turn around to cultural institutions, and if that's part of the strategy, say we need something more from you, because compared to other similar districts, we are, we have an anemic budget or whatever.
Okay, we can talk to the small business owners.
I think that some of those metrics, SBS has comparing bids to bid, one bid to another, not all of them. But to the extent that SBS has them, and I believe some of that information has been made public, particularly administrative costs to operating costs and the like.
Absolutely.
That, I'm sure we can provide that. Ms. Levin, then Ms. Efron. And then Ms. Edwards.
Yes, Barry, I have two questions. One is, as you indicated, it's quite unusual for residential properties to be included in the assessment, and I'm curious about the history here and why that is the case and what that says about bids in general. And my second question is about, there is a condition in the community board's letter, which is they want a seat back on the board. Is there some history there, and are they going to get their seat? Community boards are normally represented on bid boards. What's the story?
Okay, so the first question about the assessment on residents. When the bid was established in 1991, there really were no substantial residential property in the district. It was really a commercial district. There might have been one residential building in the entire district, all residential. The rest of the residential that was there were basically commercial on the ground floor with 2 units above. So, residential was not really an issue, and mixed buildings, such as we now have in downtown Brooklyn, was not really an issue. So the way the formula was written, it basically just said total assessed value. And then suddenly we got thousands of units of residential, and so suddenly they were picked up by the formula. And this is being now continued in the South using the same sort of mechanism.
So it's just an accident of history that we're not going to correct?
At this point, there was no interest in sort of trying to change the formula.
Thank you.
I can let on Wednesday, the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership can sort of explain what sort of happened with the community board, but I think there was kind of like a feeling on the part of the board, and it wasn't just in terms of the community board, it was, they felt like there was meddling going on. I have no idea meddling about what, but there was meddling, and they decided they just wanted to throw everybody off the board, which they could not do. So the bid has put the community board back on. They've agreed to make sure the community board is represented. And the community board has also said that their representative will be a residential tenant who lives in the district. So it would be like one that represents the community board, but they also represent residential tenants. And that's in addition to the one residential tenant that must be on the board by statute.
Okay, so that issue's on its way to being addressed.
There's a lot of interest in this. Ms. Efron, Ms. Deluz, then Mr. Cirillo, and then Ms. Ortiz.
I think there's a lot of interest because there seem to be bigger and more bids, and I think it's probably useful to air some of these questions. If, in fact, there's any income from activities, whether it's a TKTS booth or something else particular to a cultural district, does that money then it goes into the general coffers, correct, and reduces the amount?
General bid coffers?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think, for the most part, they are compensated, like if it's a city event or something like that, they are compensated for the service. And yes, it goes into their budget. In theory, they could reduce their assessment if they wanted to reduce services.
Okay. I suppose I can find this out for general bid law, but it's kind of an interesting question. Thank you.
In general, it just increases revenue, does not... I've yet to see a bid, including the one I was involved in, actually providing a rebate, so...
Or a reduction the following year.
Ms. Deluz.
Barry, this is mostly just in preparation for Wednesday's hearing. I know that there was a lot of discussion at the neighborhood level about which blocks to include, which ones not. Obviously, this is across the street from Barclays and the Atlantic Yards project, and that has its own set of impacts on the proposed area. So I would just hope that on Wednesday we could hear a little bit more about how that will be handled moving forward.
In terms of their boundaries?
Mr. Cirillo.
Oh, okay. I guess, Barry, you just referenced, just to understand, in addition to the committee that the bid has agreed to establish for the residential component, there will be a residential board member, at least one.
Yes.
Which is typical, right? So.
Well, they're required to have a residential tenant on the board.
At least one. I mean, they could elect 10 if they
Right.
wanted to.
That's correct.
Right? Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because the residents do have an opportunity through the election process on the board to have, in addition to the community board, which I'm glad they've corrected that situation, and now this committee, which will focus specifically on the concerns of the residential population.
Right.
They will also have an elected director on the board, at least one, which is good. Just two thoughts that come out of this discussion. Historically, there was no distinction between residential owners and commercial owners. As someone who has an older bid, there is no distinction between a commercial property owner or a residential owner. It's an owner of real estate. And so if you are in the Grand Central district and you own a condo, you are assessed with what the board, has chosen to provide as the assessment, with the support, obviously, the legislative process that the city follows to do that. So the trend was later. I mean, the history was there was no distinction, basically. And then the trend was later, which I think was more previous administration, which focused intently. I think for us, the issue we need to spend time thinking about as mixed-use neighborhoods become the reality, and that's a positive thing for the business community and for residents, that we have neighborhoods that are more 24/7, which is what a bid strives to do even in a core commercial district, is to create an environment where there's something happening and your retailers have shoppers and diners and everything else that's happening, that we need to recognize that perhaps that chapter of trend is not really the future. And as so long as there are protections involved and there's a seat at the table or more than one seat for people to have the discussions that are important to them. And so I just throw that out there as a thought. And
Yeah, I hadn't realized it was so bounded by time.
correct. And I mean, and I think in fairness, although I know the math, this is all very average, but when you look at the fact that $118 per year, which is, it's $10 a month, to have the benefits of sort of this 7-day-a-week operation in your neighborhood is actually not a lot to ask, although I realize nobody ever wants to pay more for anything they think they should be getting anyway, which is always the bid's fight. And the last thing I would say about we'll call it surplus revenue, is that the positive aspect of that, and that also helps to create an incentive from a managerial point of view to manage a budget correctly, is that it is important for bids to amass at some degree some reserve. And it's not only a best practice that the city controller encourages, the mayor, our elected representatives on our board, which is also important to remember, that the borough president, the controller, the mayor, and the council member are all members of the board and help to, sort of keep the checks and balances if, hopefully it's not necessary, but when it is, it's important to have it. That it does help to create some bank account for emergency circumstances and other, operational issues that may come up. So, I mean, I think this is very well thought out, and, hopefully the community feels the same. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi. So are cultural institutions, I understand, I should say, that sometimes issues of governance, the details are dealt with a little later, but, has there been any thought given to how cultural institutions will participate in governance at this stage?
I'm not aware of it, but you can ask on Wednesday.
Okay, great. And will there be, do you know if any of the cultural institutions will be here at the hearing?
They will be.
Great.
Ask her directly.
I have a few questions, Barry, and also just, this is a commission that is highly knowledgeable about the subject of bids. But our role is, in this process is somewhat constrained and limited to, with respect to the land use implications of the creation of the bid, and also the fairness of and full disclosure of the process, so that everyone is aware of a bit of what's going on. So with respect to the latter, Barry, you indicated the response rate on commercial and residential owners and occupants in the bid. Is the response rate among commercial and residential owners fairly typical? Is it atypical in terms of your prior experience?
I think it's on the lower side. Again, I think a lot of effort went into trying to search these folks out and trying to get them to respond. And there was very little sort of negative feedback on it. There was a good deal of positive feedback, although folks, were not willing to sign things. Some of it is because they are, they can't sign something because it's a corporation. They have to go to corporate to get permission. It's a little unclear. I think there's a certain amount of sort of general indifference, which is not always the best situation, but, I think in a neighborhood bid, people sometimes can be a lot more engaged because they're much more tied into the neighborhood as opposed to being in sort of a downtown environment. But, certainly had very strong property owners. And I guess the partnership can talk more about the outreach.
Well, to be candid, it's easy to get the property owner support because ultimately...
Not always.
Not always, but usually because they're not the ones who ultimately have to pay. And I realize here, for all the reasons that Mr. Cirillo indicated, we haven't gotten too many applications with residents who have been asked to pay. But with respect to commercial tenants, is the response rate fairly typical, low, high, or average?
Again, I think it would be on the low side.
Then my second question is, with respect to board representation, is there are two different sub-areas here, each with differentiated services and to some extent differentiated purposes. Will the sub-area, the new sub-area, sub-area B, is that sub-area B?
South sub-areas.
South sub-area, will that have proportional representation on the board?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Interesting hearing on Wednesday.
Let's now advance to item number 5, page 52, proposed urban development action area project designation, project approval to facilitate adaptive reuse of an existing community facility building at 269 Henry Street. Our presenter is Joel from the Manhattan office. Manhattan pre-hearing, item number 5, page 52.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this application is returning as a pre-hearing item after review by Manhattan Community Board 3. It's an application by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development for approval of an urban development action area project designation and project approval of city-owned property located at 269 Henry Street. Approval of the requested actions will facilitate the rehabilitation and conversion of an existing former firehouse to a community facility building in the Lower East Side of Manhattan Community Board 3. 269 Henry Street is located on the north side of Henry Street between Grand Street to the east and Montgomery Street to the west. The site's improved with a 4-story former firehouse building that was operated by the New York City Fire Department, and that building's right here. So in April 2007, the City Council approved an application for disposition of 269 Henry Street. During the public review process, Community Board 3 and the Manhattan Community Board President did not support the unrestricted disposition of the property. And so therefore that 2007 approval included a restriction that the property be used as a community facility. So subsequent to the approval, a steering committee was created that included the Manhattan Borough President, the Community Boards, City Hall, various city agencies, and this was to identify an end user for the site, and ultimately the Lower East Side nonprofit Henry Street Settlement was selected. So as part of the proposed project, the existing firehouse will be rehabilitated and converted to this community facility. The rehabilitation will not add any additional density or height to the existing building. The new community facility will provide a neighborhood resource center operated by Henry Street Settlement, and services on site will include crisis intervention, financial counseling, legal services, and access to benefits including free or low-cost health insurance, public assistance, food stamps, and Social Security. On May 26, 2015, the Manhattan Community Board 3 passed a resolution recommending approval of the proposed project, which again seeks seeks approval of an urban development action area project designation and project approval of city-owned property at 269 Henry Street. So the public hearing is on Wednesday, and HPD will be here to present in addition to Henry Street settlement.
Questions for Joel? This is the first time you've appeared before us with no questions.
That's great.
I can remember.
Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 6, page 75, a Bronx pre-hearing application with respect to a series of land use actions, zoning map and zoning text amendment, special permit, authorization and a mod to an existing restrictive deck to facilitate over 175 affordable housing units for seniors and disabled individuals in the Mott Haven neighborhood of the Bronx. Paul Phillips from the Bronx office will be presenting. We're on item number 6, page 75, Bronx pre-hearing application.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chair Weisbrod, Commissioners. This item is before us for pre-hearing review. The applicant, the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing, is seeking the approval of 5 actions. The first is a zoning map change from R6 to R72 with C14 and C24 overlays, and R6 to R6 with C14 commercial overlays. The second is a zoning text amendment to permit a reduction in required parking for residential uses. The third is a special permit pursuant to Section 74743 to permit the location of buildings without regard to applicable yards, courts, distance between buildings, heights, and also setback regulations. The third is also a special permit pursuant to 74745 to waive the number of required off-street accessory parking spaces. And the fifth action is an authorization to permit a reduction of required bicycle parking spaces. Together, these actions would facilitate the development of 178 income-restricted housing units for seniors within the Mott Haven section of Bronx Community Board 1. On April 29th, 2015, Community Board 1 held a public hearing on this item and voted 29 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining. The Borough President also held a public hearing on this item on May 15th and voted to approve this application.
Thank you, Paul. Questions? Any questions? Thank you.
See you Wednesday. Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 7, page 153, proposed zoning text amendment to permit community facility use within Queens Plaza Subdistrict of the Special Long Island City District. Our presenter is Penny Lee, planner in the Queens office. We're on item number 7, page 153, Queens pre-hearing.
It's a damn good idea.
Good afternoon. This is the application by Bright Horizons to modify the Queens Plaza Subdistrict text provisions to allow community facility uses on 4 blocks of Queens Plaza where the ground floor use had previously been restricted to just commercial. Bright Horizons filed the application to facilitate their construction of a daycare facility on Block 420, located at the corner of Queens Plaza South and Jackson Avenue. The majority of their site, the community facility use would be allowed as of right. There's this small portion outlined in red that is subject to the community facility use restriction. This application affects sites in both Community Boards 1 and 2 in Queens. Community Board 1 at their May meeting recommended in favor of the application, 42 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstentions. And Community Board 2, by a show of hands at their June 4th meeting, unanimously recommended in favor of the application. The Borough President is having her Borough Board meeting tonight, and they are hopeful that they will have a quorum, and then they will be able to send in their application or their recommendation by Wednesday.
Questions for Penny? Ms. Ortiz?
Hi, how are you? Earlier when this came up for certification, there were some issues raised and concerns related to sound attenuation, pollution, concerns about drop-off and pickup, because it's a very, very busy intersection. I'm curious, sort of have there been any changes or reflections on the plan as a result? I mean, you mentioned something about the windows at the time. I mean, could you speak to?
Well, they're required to, there's an E designation on the property specific to noise, so they will be required to put in the required window wall attenuation to meet DEP's requirements to keep it quiet. So that goes without saying.
But those requirements don't reflect the heightened issues of sound at this particular location?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
That was done at the time the property was rezoned in 2001. And when we talked to DEP and the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination, they were quite specific that while the office building the office portion of the building wasn't required to do any specific window wall attenuation, the fit out of the space for Bright Horizons has to provide, I forget the exact DBA, but it will be specific to children in a building.
Okay, that's helpful.
And in terms of the traffic and drop-off, the applicant will be here on Wednesday, as well as the operator from Bright Horizons, so they can speak more specifically. But there is on 28th Street, which is a fairly wide street, the entrance is on 28th Street, so there's an opportunity for drop-off here.
Okay.
And then there's also an entrance to the subway station right about here. So you would come here, or you would come here and drop off your children. And then there's a bus stop one block to the west, and there's also a bus stop just right around the corner.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin?
Yes, Penny, I have a question about the potential for community facility use on not the Bright Horizons portion that's affected, but the other blocks. Because you had mentioned, I guess I'd asked it when we referred this out, why there was that limitation, and you had said at the time you were hoping for, sort of jazzier street-level activity.
Right.
In fact, I think the Bright Horizons build-out, which looks like it's mostly complete, is going to fulfill that, because they have, the windows are fully transparent, you're going to see a lot of activity, it's going to fulfill what you were hoping for. But we all know that community facility use might not get built out there that way. Are there transparency requirements in the text,
yes,
so that we can, even if we do end up with community facility uses on those other sites, they will be similarly active?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at least 50% transparent. It's the standard transparency requirement that's in effect in high-density commercial areas.
Excellent.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Penny.
Let's now go to item number 8, page 193, proposed disposition of city-owned property, acquisition of property, and modification to a previously approved special permit to facilitate mixed-use development, including the Brooklyn Heights Library.
Chair, just note for the record, I have to recuse myself.
Noted.
May have to.
And Mr. Dweck as well is recused on this item.
The record will so note. And our presenter is Alex Summers from the...
Did you?
I don't benefit, so.
I know. Did you see the exchange about Sharon?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. This is an application by the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, the Brooklyn Public Library, and Hudson Companies seeking the disposition of city-owned land, acquisition of a condominium unit in the proposed new development, and the modification of a previously approved Vulcan Heights special permit. These actions would facilitate a new mixed-use development, including approximately 21,500 square foot public library and approximately 280,000 square feet of residential, retail, and community facility space in downtown Brooklyn Community District 2. The proposed site is map C64 as well as the surrounding blocks, and it's also located within the special district downtown Brooklyn. The zoning allows high-density commercial, residential, and community facility development of between 10 to 12 FAR, depending on participation in the inclusionary housing program or providing urban design bonuses such as plazas or arcades. C64 tower regulations require a setback of between 10 and 15 feet after a height of 85 feet, and there are no maximum building heights. The proposed project site is located on the border of the predominantly residential Brooklyn Heights neighborhood to the west, and downtown Brooklyn, the borough's central business district, to the south and the east. As well, to the east and then running north is a large swath of public parkland connecting downtown Brooklyn to Dumbo and the East River waterfront and Brooklyn Bridge Park. The surrounding area is mapped R8, which has a max FAR of 6.02 and scattered C15 commercial overlays. These consist generally of height factor residential towers with scattered retail, the buildings rising between 35 and 280 feet in height. Immediately adjacent to the proposed project site along Clinton Street, residential and community facilities rise between 80 and 140 feet in height. Blocks further west are mapped R71 with a max FAR of 3.44, but that area generally falls within a limited height district, LH1, which caps building heights to 50 feet. The Brooklyn Heights Historic District is designated over the vast majority of Brooklyn Heights to the west. The Borough Hall Historic Skyscraper District is also just south of this site. The immediate area is well served by transit, including access to the subway lines at the Clark Street 2-3, Borough Hall 2-3-4-5, and the Court Street N and R lines, and these are all within 2 to 3 blocks of the site. As well, multiple bus routes run along Cabin Plaza West and Adams Street. The proposed project site, Block 239, lots 1, 3, and 16, are currently improved with 3 buildings. Lot 1 consists of 1 Pierre Pont Plaza, a 19-story, 320-foot tall, approximately 600,000 square foot commercial office building. Lot 3 consists of St. Anne's Private School. It's a 6-story, 85-foot high, 23,000 square foot school building. And Lot 16, which is the proposed development site, consisting of a 2-story Brooklyn Heights Branch Public Library. The existing library contains both a branch library and a business and career library within approximately 28,600 square feet of usable space. There is an additional approximately 29,400 square feet of unusable space, which includes a former fallout shelter, which is inaccessible to the public, as well as mechanical and storage space for uncatalogued books and old supplies. The Brooklyn Public Library has stated it plans to relocate the business and career branch to the central library at Grand Army Plaza, regardless of whether the proposed development occurs. The existing facility has also unfunded capital needs of more than $9.2 million, including a non-functioning HVAC system, which has forced the library to operate on reduced hours during summer months. The applicants are now proposing to redevelop the Brooklyn Heights Branch Library with a new mixed-use building, and that's the gray area on this slide here. The proposed building is a 36-story, approximately 415-foot high development, consisting of approximately 294,900 square feet. It includes space for a new Brooklyn Heights Branch Library, as well as ground floor retail and community facility space, and approximately 139 market rate dwelling units. The new library would be located within a city-owned condominium at the ground floor of the building, accessible from Cadman Plaza West, and total approximately 21,500 square feet. And this includes a mezzanine space for additional reading rooms and cellar space for additional stacks and presentations. And that's cellar space. In addition, approximately 153,000 square feet is being generated by 114 off-site affordable units pursuant to the zoning resolution 23-90. These are proposed in 2 new mixed-use buildings located in Clinton Hill within Community District 2, and these are currently mapped R7A C24. The applicants are proposing the following AMI breakdowns for these buildings. 20 units at less than 60% of AMI, 61 units at less than 80% of AMI, 6 units at less than 100% of AMI, and 24 units at less than 165% of AMI. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicants are requesting 3 actions: disposition, acquisition, and modification of a previously approved special permit. DCAS and Brooklyn Public Library intend to dispose of the 26,620 square foot Lot 16 to Hudson Companies for the proposed redevelopment. During the redevelopment of the site, the applicants are proposing to relocate the library to facilitate continuous service during construction. The temporary facility would be located at 113 Remsen Street, approximately 2.5 blocks from the library's existing location. The space would be used as it's currently used as a social hall, 7,500 square feet, owned by Our Lady of Lebanon Church. Once the development of the proposed building is complete, the city would acquire a condo within the base of the building, again totaling approximately 21,500 square feet, spread throughout the ground floor, a mezzanine, and cellar space. Part of the space would include an auditorium, adult reading room, teen lounge, and children's reading room. It is anticipated that the branch library will have a staff of 10 and serve approximately 200 to 300,000 patrons annually. The condo will also include 2 dedicated parking spaces in the below-grade parking garage. The branch library is anticipated to operate between 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday and Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. To 5 p.m. on Sundays. The final action is a modification of a previously approved special permit, 860392-ZSK. In 1985, the City Planning Commission granted a height and setback special permit pursuant to 74-721 to a then-proposed 1 Pierre Pont Plaza, whose zoning lot included both Lot 1, Pierre Pont Plaza, as well as the library's site, Lot 16. The special permit was subsequently modified, then refiled and approved in 1986. The modified waivers included an increase in the height of the building from 375 feet to 397 feet, a reduction in building setbacks, and an increase in total floor area from nearly 592,000 square feet to about 601,000 square feet. These changes were to increase access to light and air along Clinton and Pierre Pont Streets. Because the proposed 1 Clinton redevelopment is located on a zoning lot, which includes 1 Pierre Pont Plaza, the previously approved special permit must be modified to reflect the proposed development. This includes the alteration to the zoning lot and slight design changes to existing open areas on the zoning lot. You should also take note that due to tower regulations created under the 2004 downtown Brooklyn rezoning, 1 Pierre Pont's need for waivers have been significantly reduced, and 1 Clinton's proposed tower would be considering as of right outside of these actions. In conclusion, these actions would facilitate the redevelopment of a 2-story public library into a 295,000 square foot mixed-use development, a new 21,500 square foot library, and 114 off-site affordable housing units. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Questions?
Just one quick.
Mr. Knuckles.
The record indicates that the current library, which may well be inefficient, but has approximately 28,600 square feet of usable space versus the 21,500 square feet that is proposed for the new facility.
The difference between the two is it's currently occupied by both a branch library as well as the business and career library. And the business and career library is actually moving off-site regardless of the actions, and so that's part of the discrepancy in the total square footage size.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin?
Alex, I'd like to ask about the 2 off-site the affordable housing sites. Are those currently controlled by the applicant?
I know for a fact one is. I believe they're in negotiations on the other site, and I'll have them respond.
Okay, so the plan is that they will acquire,
Yes.
and then, will they be the developers, or?
Yes. And the same architect for both this building as well as those buildings.
Okay, and I understand that one of those sites does have some residential units that are occupied?
Yes, I believe so.
And I'm sure we'll hear about it in the course of the process, but I'm curious about what the fate of those tenants will be.
I'll follow up.
Okay.
Ms. Efron?
Has the FAR transfer with the school taken place? Is that already negotiated?
I believe it's been negotiated, but the official zoning lot merger has not yet occurred.
Right. So, no, thanks.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. I guess we'll ask Commissioner De La Ruz and Dweck to return. Let's now go to item number 9. It's a post-hearing follow-up for the actions associated with the Staten Island Mall enlargement. And our presenter is Barry Fisher of the Staten Island office.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. The applicant, General Growth Properties, along with co-applicants Macy's and J.C. Penney, request CPC authorizations for layout of parking, reduction in parking requirement, and modifications of landscaping requirements within a C41 zoning district. These actions would facilitate the proposed enlargement of the existing Staten Island Mall, which you see the site plan here, located on an 85-acre site in the Heartland Village of Staten Island's Community District 2. This enlargement would be located on a portion of existing parking, replacing 1,780 parking spaces with approximately 418,000 square feet of new floor area for theater, more retail space, new eating space, a 3-level parking structure, a multi-use open plaza, additional landscaping, and improved pedestrian connections, and would result in an overall net reduction of 367 parking spaces for a new total of 5,477 parking spaces. For the requested CPC authorizations, the Commission must find that the proposed parking lot site plan provides adequate ingress and egress to abutting streets and uses. Proposed parking is sufficient for the proposed uses. Maneuverability and curb cut regulations have been complied with to the maximum extent possible. The amount of interior planting islands and their distribution throughout the parking lot have been provided to the maximum extent possible. And that perimeter and interior landscaping has been engineered to absorb stormwater runoff to the maximum extent possible. This project had been referred to Community Board 2 on March 16th, who voted recommending approval, 21 in favor, 11 against, without any comments or conditions. The applicant notes that the proposed development will result in 943 new jobs and will support a significant upgrade of a 1971-era shopping center to meet the demands and needs of today's shoppers, provides a significant new public gathering space, and represents a significant private investment in a portion of the city where the city is investing in Fresh Skills Park right across the street from Richmond Avenue. The Staten Island Mall enlargement project was the subject of a draft environmental impacts public hearing on May 6th. The DEIS identified unmitigated impacts in one or more peak hour periods at 5 intersections. Standard mitigation measures were also proposed at these intersections, as well as the other 38 of the 38 intersections where needed. But the analysis indicated that those measures would not mitigate the impacts. Since the DEIS was issued, Department of Transportation's Highway and Signal Divisions took a hard look at the mitigation analysis and had found some proposed measures involving lane reconfigurations to have safety issues, such as for trucks turning safely and for vehicles to avoid head-on collisions, and therefore concluded that the proposed mitigation measures were impractical at 8 of the intersections in which mitigation or partial mitigation was proposed in the DEIS. So the applicant now indicates or discloses that a total of 13 intersections surrounding the mall would have unmitigated impacts. And this represents the reasonable worst case scenario, which is only during the peak holiday shopping period. The applicants have agreed to perform a follow-up traffic monitoring plan within 6 months of the completion of the proposed project. The purpose of the monitoring plan is to further study the proposed mitigation measures identified in the FEIS and explore potential mitigation measures that, measures for potential impacts identified as partially mitigated or unmitigated. Now, no public comments have been received regarding the draft EIS, and so the final EIS will be issued on Friday, June 19th. In response to questions from the commission, the applicant provided a letter which has been distributed to everybody. The applicant noted in response to a question that the pedestrian paths between Richmond Avenue, which of course has the Springville Greenway, New Springville Greenway across the street next to Fresh Kills, that the previously proposed pedestrian paths would be modified to be shared pedestrian and bike paths, allowing cyclists to enter the mall property separate from vehicular traffic. The internal ring road, which surrounds 3 sides of the mall, would be a Class 3 bike lane and be marked with arrows, shared arrows, alerting motorists and bicyclists that lanes are to be shared. This is 2 lanes in each direction currently, and would remain that way for much of its length, and 1 lane in each direction in the back. In regards to a question about sidewalks, the applicant noted that the project's sidewalks will provide a minimum 6-foot clearance, and curb cuts will be provided near all entrances and crosswalks to ensure ADA accessibility. Additionally, parking spaces will be provided in close proximity to the front and other entrances to meet ADA regulations. In response to a question about providing upgrades or new bus shelters, the applicant noted that 7 bus stops currently serve the mall. 3 of them are within the project area. 1 is outside the project area in the Sears zoning lot, and 3 are off-site in publicly owned property within the street. Of those 7 stops, 4 of them have bus shelters and 3 do not. Of the sites without the shelters, 2 of them are located on mall property, so the applicant will continue to work with MTA to develop a plan to build additional shelters, but construction and upgrading them is dependent on MTA's bus stop franchisee. The applicant will work diligently to follow up on these concerns. The question regarding whether electric charging stations would be included in the parking structure, the applicant has stated that an agreement with Volta Charging that provides charging stations at 11 of their properties on the West Coast in central U.S. Will also, they're also working on a strategy with them for the East Coast properties, and the SA Mall is being considered for these stations. No decision has been made yet, but the new garage designs will not, preclude any future possibility of electric charging stations in the garage. The potential for extending the loop, the ring road, that's currently 3 sides of the mall, the potential to extend it on the 4th side as a means to reduce traffic on Platinum Avenue has, the applicant has noticed that while the applicant and co-applicants do not have any control over this Sears zoning lot and cannot commit to any future design or layout of that parcel, there's nothing in the current enlargement plans that would preclude extending the loop roads being a continuous circle through the Sears property by Sears at some point in the future. So in summary, the department believes that the application has been carefully considered. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Cantor.
You referenced that the applicant is going to have a follow-up traffic survey. Mm-hmm. Is it by the same consultant who did the initial traffic survey?
I don't know about that particular aspect. I would imagine that would be an option, but.
Well, the reason I asked the question is the man indicated there were certain areas that were not resolvable.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Is he going to come come back now after a traffic survey and decide that they're going to be resolvable? You're asking him to reverse his own opinion.
Well, it's DOT that has, weighed in on the decision to not allow, if you will, mitigations at these additional 8 intersections. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
What would happen after, during the monitoring plan, which would be 6 months after it's built out, perhaps in 2018, 2019, 2020, depending on when Macy's gets finished, I believe, is that the real world conditions may be different than what's forecast. The forecast is based on current conditions times, an extrapolation of growth. So, it would be a better reflection of real world conditions.
Well, that's true. Now, if the real-world conditions showed work was necessary, is there any understanding as to when the work would be done after learning what the work should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have the...
I think it would be impossible now to determine what would be required after.
No, that wasn't my question. Saying at the end of the day, when they determine what's required, is there some sort of a commitment that's time-wise to institute any changes or any modifications as a result of the survey?
No, I would think that that's an issue that would have to be addressed after the survey with both the mall and DOT, because after all, it's in the mall's interests as well as DOT's interests to address it at that time. But how they would address it, I think, will depend a lot on what they find when they do the survey. Is that fine?
Quick question. We were told several months ago that it's now a requirement of all parking garage permits to have electric charging stations. Is there not a requirement here because it's an existing parking lot, or could you just get back to me or us about why this should be outside of the scope of other parking garages, considering it's a large parking area?
Yeah, I can get into that.
We'll get back.
Thanks. A lot. Is that why there's no requirement?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Barry.
Thank you. So, moving right along, Commissioners just wanted to announce that we have a request from HPD to delay the vote for PROMESA for 2 weeks until July 1st. They're having some scheduling conflicts. Trying to schedule some meetings across the street once you guys complete your deliberation. So we've been asked to push that vote back for 2 weeks. As for Wednesday, we have prepared favorable reports for the Hospital for Special Surgery, which involves a series of land use actions to facilitate its expansion. We have 41 Great Jones Street, which is a special permit to facilitate residential use. S&L Aerospace Metals, which is the disposition to facilitate expansion to an existing business in College Point, Queens. We have the proposed text amendment to support the reconstruction of Hurricane Sandy impacted areas, known as the Special Regulations for Neighborhood Recovery. We have Johnson Street, which is a special South Richmond Development District certification for zoning lot subdivision to facilitate commercial use and accessory parking. We have 57 Willis Avenue, which is a commission certification with respect to the restoration of property within the Special Hillsides Preservation District by removing lot coverage on the existing zoning lot. We also have 60 Louise Lane, which is a City Planning Commission Special Natural Area District certification involving tree planting requirements for property within the Special Natural Area District. We have 178 Foster Road, which is a special South Richmond Development District certification for future subdivision. And we have 324 Robinson Avenue, which is a proposed special South Richmond Development District zoning lot subdivision, all on for Wednesday. As for 2 weeks, July 1st, in addition to the application from HPD that was just described, we also have 520 West 28th Street, which is a special permit for accessory parking. There was a concern raised about the access into the parking garage that the applicant responded to in a letter to you that was in your package. And Ezra's just going to very briefly describe that letter.
Good afternoon. So the applicant provided a letter in response to the questions raised by the commissioners at the June 3rd public hearing, specifically about concerns relating to the operation of the entry and exit bay and the time associated with loading and unloading a vehicle prior to intake. In the letter, the applicant reviews the garage's operations, noting in particular the measures in place to maximize safety and efficiency. The applicant notes that the entry bay is located directly adjacent to the the residential portion's concierge desk. This allows the concierge to assist users with the loading and unloading of vehicles and will ensure efficient operation in the rare event that more than one vehicle is waiting to access the garage. The applicant found that with 3 similar automated facilities, there was a daily turnover of approximately 30% of vehicles. They assert that an accessory automated facility with 29 spaces, such as theirs, would therefore experience approximately 10 vehicles coming in and out per day. Therefore, they do not anticipate any backups or delays. Also following the hearing, the applicant reached out to the operator of an attended accessory parking facility with a similar target demographic and developed by the same developer. That garage with 46 spaces had a daily turnover of approximately 17% for vehicles that were on a monthly contract. According to the applicant, while Fridays and Sundays saw a few more vehicles entering and exiting than other days, there were no temporal spikes or specific times in which vehicles were stacking up. The operator also explained to the applicant that many of the units were pied-à-terres, and that very few vehicles were utilized for commuting with regular ins and outs. The applicant expects a very similar situation for the subject automated accessory garage.
Any questions? Thank you.
We also have for July 1st, 76 Greenwich Avenue, St. Vincent's Park, which involves proposed city map and zoning text amendment. We have the Melrose Commons North Site B, a series of actions to facilitate affordable housing, mixed-use development in the Melrose neighborhood of the Bronx. We have the Staten Island Mall enlargement, which was just discussed, and we will get back to the commission regarding requirements for charging stations for electric cars prior to that vote. And we have the Bank of Manhattan landmark, which is in Queens. And we have determined that there are no conflicts with the zoning resolution, projected public improvements or plans for the area involved.
Is that it, Madam Secretary?
That's it.
I love that chair.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts, or anything? And if not, we're adjourned till Wednesday.